Welcome back. Hello everybody. This session deals with some of my own personal experiences and how I have tried, through going through what could be described, for me anyway, to be like a living hell, dealing with people who do not have a concept of really what my life has been focusing on for so many years. How those people can be so much in control, to the detriment of my life and what I'm trying to do for people. And during this very unfortunate experience, which really could be described as very difficult, low vibration, uncomfortable, horrible, unreasonable, and worrying, as far as our security was concerned, I tried to slightly step outside it and view it rather as I'd view a movie. It was almost like a big experiment for me. Maybe that helped me keep control, I don't know. It was an experiment that all along we told the truth, and we were persistent with that. And there were one or two times we became definite, where we felt we couldn't be too passive, particularly with this group of people who promote themselves as being trustworthy. And I suspect what triggered them the most was me repeating to them what they were telling the public, and how that was somehow conflicting with what I was hearing from them. People will say, if you're going through an experience with a narcissist, a malignant narcissist, or a psychopath, how can one keep one's compassion without being bullied, without being a victim? And it is very difficult, because when you are wronged, when you are robbed, when you are insulted, when your family is put under pressure, your family's future is put under pressure, when you're kept put to ransom, when you're kept to ransom, how can gentleness work? Well, for my experience, and this is something that I'd never experienced before, what you experience is the love and compassion of the other people around you. So particularly those are the people who are important in your life, your family. For instance, there are family members like my brother who I communicated on a regular basis, and we became closer because of this, because of the support he gave me. It also emphasized to me how supportive I was within my own family, with Trish and others. And therefore those truths are they amplified at the same time as the pressure being on you, rather like the song Brothers in Arms, and the idea that a brotherhood and a sisterhood can be born of within the most difficult of circumstances. So this was somehow making sense to me during this, and apart from the very difficult times when one is attacked and gaslighted by the psychopathic force, there's certainly a silver lining to this very dark night that is imposed on one. I also began to understand that whatever way I moved in this, I was unable to escape. One can look at a whole sequence of events when something like this happens, when you're under psychopathic attack, that you could feel a victim to. You could say, well, if this hadn't happened, we wouldn't be in the state we were in, or this thing didn't happen. It just happened to be a whole lot of unfortunate coincidences, and then one can feel somehow a victim to that. Or else you can say, look, whichever way I turned, this was the outcome. This is what happened. And somehow, is that a lesson? Is that a lesson of acceptance without having to accept and be a victim, and to let go of any power that we have when we are in this situation? And that's not a power to control others, that's a power that we hold for ourselves and our loved ones. I also learned during this time something that I hadn't learned before. As you may know, I've written 3 books, and they're basically about healing. The last one, The Human Hologram, talks about how our physical state here is only one version of a greater reality. It talks about the fact that there is a primacy of consciousness, of information, and that this world reality could be seen as almost as a virtual reality that collapses down from a greater reality that is somehow outside time and space, and somehow more linked to our essence and who we are deeply. It is certainly much more linked to things like love and compassion and connectivity. That we're in this role here in our physical bodies for a reason, to connect with others, to do good things, hence grow this field of compassion and consciousness, which is like a big living system. So our physical reality, of course, is very real, but there's more besides. And therefore we don't have to strive in a material way in this life to achieve what we call material wealth at the expense of others' suffering. And before this incident, I didn't know how I could possibly grow or become any more a better human being through such an experience. And this has told me, actually, no, it has told me a lot. It has also told me that compassion can come out of this, even though one is threatened by a particular person, which in my case and in your case would have been a psychopath, and that forgiveness in one sense it is very difficult, because one would hope through an act of forgiveness the person would change. In this case, that isn't the case. The person is very unlikely to change. However, many other people around that person may change. The family may change. There may be somebody who decides to leave the situation that they're in around this person because of what one does. So it certainly sort of clarifies things. It also shows me a side of how the world works, which I never had experience about before. And through that knowledge, through that experience, I have been able to gain insights that have hopefully helped others. Hence, hopefully this series is trying to explain that. So those are the silver linings that come through. It would seem that our systems are very much built around a falsity, and that's become an awareness for me, that people are maybe deeply unhappy in their roles in life when they're involved in this system. In particular, I've seen people in the legal profession who seem to be deeply unhappy, and it stresses and worries me that that's the case. There's a high incidence of depression and suicide there, because I can see that they're locked into this system. And these are good people who have probably gone into this work to help others and to see justice. But what's happened is that it would seem the greed, and in many cases corporate greed, I'd have to say, of the last 30 years that's gone unchallenged, has tarnished this situation, as it's tarnished our democracies, our corporations, and our institutions have become more and more psychopathic. So it's given me insight into that, and it's also insight into how that causes disease within people. Initially, it may well cause anxiety, insomnia, and depression, and those are actually messages that the person is getting within this situation, that this is an unnatural, disconnected environment. And if those aren't heeded, of course, the illness will go even deeper and maybe cause immune problems and heart problems and cancer. So the other silver lining is that it's given me an insight into the cause, the etiology, the pathogenesis, all those words, of illness that I'd never totally understood before. And allowed me to help people and advise them how best to cope with a situation. Because I know how difficult it is to get out of the situation when you're in it. And how easy it is to try and bury this and to keep quiet because people will not understand. And this is why we should be talking about it. By cutting one's teeth on a particular malignant narcissist or psychopath, one begins to understand the whole spectrum of narcissism and what we keep inside of us, the narcissist inside, the shadow inside. It's very much like when you're learning something as a doctor, you're often shown the most graphic and extreme example of pneumonia, for instance, or cardiac arrhythmia or tumour. And from that you get an understanding of how bad it can get, but also an understanding of all those other levels so that we can somehow prevent this. And I'm getting to realise that this was a great hole in my knowledge, this darkness of the human soul. And without knowing it, I would have not been as understanding of other people who are going through such difficult times. And through it, I hopefully can help the person come to some sense of peace and understanding of this whole process. Thank you very much. Subscribe down here. I hope some of this has made some sense. Bye.